I apologize in advance for the audio of this video. I'm using my phone right now for everything. I mean, you can tell. Even though there are thousands of varieties of tomatoes, there are three main types. There's the pasting tomato, the beefsteak tomato, and then cherries and grapes. They're very small. You know them. I know you know them. Now, each variety of tomato has a very specific use, and they grow very differently as well. So if you're looking to grow tomatoes at home, or you're looking to cook with tomatoes and you don't know what type to use, this is the video for you. But before we get started into that, let's dive a little bit into the history of each type so we can kind of see how they're different and how they were developed. Also, because it's a history channel and that's what we're going to do no matter what. The first tomatoes were found in the Andes Mountains, much like their relatives the potato. They were either wild or cultivated by ancient civilizations who lived in the area. Of course, there's not much written record about this, so we're not 100% sure. Hernandez Cortez brought the tomato back with him sometime in the 16th century. The tomato found its way into Europe by 1623, where there are rumors of a cookbook who mentions tomatoes in it. I haven't found it. I don't know. I can't prove it, but that's what I've been hearing. Now, these original tomatoes were a lot different than what we know today. They were a lot closer to a cherry tomato, except they're about the size of your fingertip. As you can see, this cherry tomato, it's a very average tomato, is quite a bit larger. These ancient tomatoes would have been pea-sized, very seedy, and relatively hollow. You can't do much with them. But besides this, they still had a decent taste. But the problem lied with the family name of the tomato. The tomato is in the nightshade family. And if you don't know, nightshades, also known as belladonna, is a very famous poison. And people during the 16th and 17th centuries knew this. And they were very wary of actually eating these tomatoes. Now, legend has it that several members of nobility actually died after eating tomatoes. But this is more than likely due to the fact that their dishware was made out of pewter. Pewter contains high amounts of lead, which don't normally leach out, at least in large amounts. But if you put an acidic substance like tomatoes in it, it will leach out the lead. So it's more than likely that these nobles actually died of lead poisoning versus tomato poisoning. Now, tomatoes did find their way into America by the 18th century. They weren't very popular. As a matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson, grew them at his famous gardens of Monticello. He claims that tomatoes were brought to America by a Portuguese doctor. I don't know where that came from. Now, it's not known what type of tomato Thomas Jefferson grew, although it is more than likely very similar to very small and seedy types of early tomato. Because it wasn't really until the late 18th and early 19th century that tomatoes really started to be highly cultivated along the Mediterranean. And this is where we get our first type of tomato, the paste tomato. And the most famous type, and one of the earliest types, is called the San Marzano. And you still find them, but it's a lot like champagne. Champagne can only be found in the Champagne region of France. And the San Marzano tomato can only be grown in San Marzano Solsano in Italy. As a matter of fact, I read an article about millions of dollars worth of illegally marketed tomatoes being seized. I wouldn't take that seriously, but they are Italian, so what do I know? What do I know? These tomatoes are also being blamed for pizza. That's right, the San Marzano was the first type of tomato to ever be put on pizza, allegedly. Once again, this is all rumors. I can't find any primary source of this. I don't know. These San Marzano tomatoes didn't become the Romas that we know today until the 20th century. At this point, they were developed to have thicker skin for better import. So pasting tomatoes came about in the early 19th centuries. But it wasn't until the late 19th century, 1870s to be exact, that the classic beefsteak tomato was invented in Ohio by a man named Alexander Livingston, who is then the founder of the Livingston Seed Company. Over the course of the next several decades, he invented more and more types of beefsteak tomatoes, the very earliest type being called the Paragon, which is very similar to the variety I have today. don't know what variety this is. I didn't plant beefsteaks where I got this tomato from, but it is a beefsteak. I don't know where it came from. I didn't plant one there. I don't know what happened, but it's there now, so I work with it, you know. These beefsteaks were a lot sweeter, a lot larger, and a lot more useful than their earlier counterparts. They were also grown to have thicker skin, making them easier to export. Now fast forward another 100 years from 1870 to 1970, and that's when the first true cherry tomato, as we know it today, was developed. Now obviously these were developed from the earliest form of tomatoes that were tiny little pea-sized little things, but they were developed to be larger, sweeter, fleshier, and also thicker skinned. It seems to be a big deal in the tomato world, and it is. They turn unripe a lot slower than they would normally. Now some people say that cherry tomatoes were invented in Santorini, Greece. But Santorini actually came out and did some research and said that no, those tomatoes are just normal tomatoes that don't grow well. So they were not invented in Santorini. They were actually developed in Israel, once again for export. Now the grape tomato, which is very similar to a cherry tomato, just elongated, was invented in Southeast Asia. Now I can't find much research about grape tomatoes, but I do know that they were first publicized or promoted in Taiwan, before eventually coming to America and becoming its own hybrid variant. So now that we have the history out of the way, let's take a look at each of these types, how they grow, and what you can use them for, which is why you click this video. But first things first, we need to figure out, well, you need to figure out two things. One, what you're planning on using the tomato for, and two, how much maintenance that you want to do with these tomatoes and how many tomato plants you want. After you figure this out, then you can come back and watch the rest of the video, but not until then, because that's important. So let's start with the paste tomato. These paste tomatoes make a lot of sauce, so if your family eats a lot of sauce, you're going to want a paste tomato of some type, San Marzano, which you can grow, you just can't call it that. Romas, Amish paste, there's hundreds of varieties. You're probably going to want to grow a paste tomato. Now because they're smaller, the plant tends to produce more, so you're getting a lot of fruit per plant, which is great, especially if you're just planting one plant, which a lot of people do. You do need a lot of tomatoes to make a little bit of sauce. So it's not going to be great for just one plant to make sauce out of. They're also great for fresh eating since they don't have as many seeds in them, but some people they like the classic slicing tomato, which will be the beefsteak. The beefsteak tomato can also make sauce since they're larger, but they have a lot more seeds in them and they're not as fleshy. They do have a thick skin, well, most of them do, make it very easy to peel. But beefsteaks are best for fresh eating, putting on salads, sandwiches, you name it. Now beefsteak plants don't produce a lot since the fruit is so large, but because the fruit is so large, you can use one fruit for many different purposes until you run out of it. Now, beefsteaks do tend to be very susceptible to diseases, pests, and cracking. You can see on this one here, it's not great. It's not great. I'm not a big fan of it, but it's the nicest looking one I have. It's middle August. And now, cherries and grapes, they're great for snacking, putting into salads, and you can also make pasta sauce out of them, or any type of sauce. They make a very sweet sauce, a very jammy sauce. You need so many of them to make sauce. Luckily, plants produce a lot, and they're a lot easier to grow. They don't crack as much as the beefsteaks do, and sometimes even the Romas do. So if you're just looking for a plant to put in a pot somewhere just to grow for fun, you're probably going to want to look at either a cherry or a grape tomato. You can do a lot with them, but it's just great for snacking overall. Now another thing with both Romas and beefsteaks is their plants, especially get the larger types of paste tomatoes. This Roma is tiny because, like I said, middle August, it's not very nice out. If you get some of the larger paste tomatoes like Amish paste, you're going to have the same problem as the beefsteak. They're going to need a lot of support to grow. These fruits are very, very heavy, and plants really can't support that on their own. So you're going to need a very strong tomato cage, trellis, whatever you use, you're going to need a big one, and you're going to need it to be strong. Cherry tomatoes, they grow, and you're not going to have that problem. But at the same time, if you put them in the ground, you're going to get them every single year. Every year. You're never going to be able to get rid of them. They'll come back year after year after year after year. It's silly, but if that's what you want, go for it. It'll become invasive pretty soon. But they're easy to grow, you know? Now, I do have a few more details on my website. I wrote an article about this. I'm trying to keep this video a little bit shorter. It's not. I like to talk, but whatever. I have all these pictures, all these descriptions, dates, original links, and even links for you to buy seeds for some of these older varieties, like the currant tomato or the wild tomato, which is that little pea-sized one, as well as Livingston's Paragon. Actually, you can still buy seeds for. So you can go to my channel, click the link to my website, and I'll have all those listed in there for easy access. That's for you. So until next time, happy gardening. I hate saying that. It sounds weird, but I'm going to say it anyway. See what you want. Bye. And so they weren't very popular in Europe, but they were a little popular. I might cut that out. This is going horrifically. 19. So you can go to my channel, click the link to my website, and I'll have all those listed in there for easy access. That's for you. Because I know you want it.